everyone, it's Jen here and welcome to Jen's World About Art. So today I'm drawing a portrait for you. I am just drawing it completely from start to finish. So I start by showing you my process. I draw an oval first, I divide that oval into thirds, and I adjust the outer shape of the face to about the width of the reference photo that I've got. I figure out where the eyes need to be, where the nose needs to be, usually in that, well they definitely are in that centre third. The eyes are at about the centre of that again. So I start by marking in roughly where I think everything should be, and I'll adjust and readjust as I go. So I figure out his mouth is about as long, like on the left side goes to the edge of his iris, and on the right side goes to the inside of his iris on the other side. I add his shirt and his shoulders, so that the thirds method actually acts sort of like a very, very vague grid method. It just helps you to get your proportions where you want them. And most faces work on the same sort of theory. Within little movements, you can change things a little bit to create the personality of everyone's face. Everyone's just a tiny little bit different, but generally they're all within that same oval with the 3/3. So I've erased the thirds now, and I'm just marking in the shadow areas where they need to be in any defining sort of spots. And I've knocked my camera. Sorry for that. I will fix it, I promise. I didn't realise I knocked it when I was doing it, but I did see it afterwards and fixed it. So I go in, I add his eyebrows, erase here and there. You'll see I adjust and readjust everything as I go. And I knock the camera again because I've got a giant head that knocks the camera all the time. So now I'm going on and just redefining eyebrows, moving things around a little bit, getting things exactly where I want them before I start to add the paint. Pop his nostrils in because I have a habit of forgetting nostrils. I'm just measuring his head against the reference. So you can see me there with my fingers. I measured sort of roughly the size, width, positioning of his different features by holding my fingers apart. You can do it with a pencil as well by holding a pencil up to something and measuring against a pencil. I just use my hands to do it. So now I'm adding the colour onto his skin tone, and I am using Venetian red and transparent pyrrole orange. I start with quite a thin wash, so there's a fair bit of red, a little bit of orange, just to to change the tone a little bit. And you can see I just take that in a wash all around his face. So for his irises, I use burnt sienna, and I just pop a wash of that in, and I try to leave the white reflections in his eyes as the white of the paper. I'm really trying hard not to use pen or white paint. I want to try and save the white of the paper to create the highlights on the painting. So now I've made a purple tone with the Venetian red and a touch of ultramarine blue to create shadow tones, just to start to get dark areas in, and it helps to have the contrast against the lights. And now this is my favouriteest colour of all. It's indigo. I love the core indigo. So, and I'm using core paints, core watercolours today, because I love their vibrancy and I love the flow, and I find them really, really easy to use. So I'm using my favourite colour, indigo, for the background. So I just plop that in and get that all done. And now I'm mixing up a slightly darker tone of the pyrrole orange and Venetian red, and I take that around the darker areas on his face. I start to build up over that purpley shadow tone. I add that colour over the top, and it actually makes it look a bit warmer, a bit more natural, because the purple can look a bit cold and a bit icky. So you add the warmer tone over the top, and you can still see it, but it still gives you that shadow effect, just not as cool. So now I'm adding the lip tone, and I'm using exactly the same skin tone. Exactly the same colour. I'm just using it more diluted. So it's, again, it's pyrrole orange and Venetian red. So now I'm adding the detail around his eyes. I use a little bit of Payne's grey with a touch of blue, and I add that directly around the edge of his eye and into the crinkle areas just directly around the edge of his face. I also go in with a little bit of that purpley tone as well, and I start to add wrinkles and all his defining sort of marks around his face. So I add the crease in his lips, the wrinkles around his eyes. And now I start to work on his hair. Again, I'm leaving the white of the paper as the white of his beautiful salt and pepper hair. So I'm using Payne's grey. I just go in and I leave little snaps of white paper shining through, and just do brush strokes following the texture of his hair. trying to keep it in the direction the hair goes so it looks a bit more realistic. Pop it onto his eyebrows too because they're still in that purpley shadow tone, so I need to give them some life, not make them look so cool. So now I start to define his shirt, and I literally go in with a little bit of just a very diluted wash of ultramarine blue, and I just do that first layer. While I'm letting that dry, I go back onto his face and I add some more skin tones, so exactly the same colours. So it's again Venetian red, pyrrole orange, just a thicker consistency, so less water, more paint. And I take that around all the areas that I want to be slightly darker, and I start to build up his face features, and I add that into the corners of his lips because the corners of his lips are a bit darker than everywhere else. Around his eyes, up onto his expression lines on his forehead. He's just had wonderful lines on his face. I really like painting people with interesting faces and with lots of creases and crinkles, lots of expression lines. It's so much fun. And I love hair. I'm really enjoying painting hair. So yeah, mind you, this is, it's just a grey sort of hair and beard, but it's still fun. It's fun to practice the textures. So I recommend, if you haven't tried portraiture, give it a go, peeps. You'll enjoy it. It's lots and lots of fun. And it takes a little bit of practice, but you do get there and you have a blast when you get to it, when you get doing it. So I'm adding slightly darker tone into the middle of his lip, around his eyes. I'm defining his pupils a bit more. So I use a bit of indigo for that. Now I go back into his hair and I start to add a bit more texture with the Payne's Grey, just to get it looking a bit more hair-like, a little less blobby. And I forgot his ear, so I'll add his ear in because luckily I've got some skin tone left over there. So I just double check the length of his face with my fingers again. And I'm going in with ultramarine blue and just defining around his shirt a little bit more now. Starting to add the collar, a little bit of stitching here and there just so it looks a bit more shirt-like. It's still very loose. It's a very impressionist. It's not, photographic by any means. It's just what I think I'm seeing of this person that I'm painting. And if you think you know who this is, if you think you recognise who I'm attempting to paint, I would love it if you would stick it in the comments below. And yeah, well, after a day or two, I'll check it out and see how many of you have got it right. And if you've got it right, that would be awesome because then I know that my portraits are coming along and I'm actually doing people that look like they're supposed to look. So yes, that would be awesome. If you think you know who this is, it's a famous person, but if you think you know who it is, I would love you to pop it into chat or into the comments box. I call it chat, but yeah, you know what I mean. So now I go a little bit darker. I add a touch of indigo to the ultramarine just to darken it up and pop that into the darkest shadow areas on his shirt to create the creasy bits. And now I go back to working on his face with stronger skin tones. Again, pyrrole orange, Venetian red, just stronger tones. And now I've got my itty bitty fine $2 brush that I just love to bits, and it's a very, very fine tip, and I take that on and I draw in the beady bits, all his little fine hairs going off in different directions. And to take that all around his face, pop in the little whiskery bits on his cheek. And then I define his hair a little bit more. Do his eyebrows and add some more shadow tones, slightly darker. So the darker your shadows, I'm building up layer by layer by layer. The more layers, the darker I get, the braver I get with the shadow tones. So I start to add really dark darks anywhere that I see shadows. It's one of the things I needed to practice a lot more, is to be bolder with my darks. And as you can see, the darker I go against the light of his beard and the lighter features of his face, the more his features stand out. It really does help to create contrast and interest in a painting. Having your darkest darks against your lightest lights is wonderful fun. So now I'm coming into the final touches. I define his pupils a little bit more. Go around his eyes, add his little eyelashes. And we're just about done, guys and girls. And I pop some more shadows up on that side of his face just to define that side a little bit more. So I'd love it if you click like and subscribe. Click on the bell icon. That way you'll be notified when I release a new video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you all next video. Okie doke. Bye.